The speaker was Professor Sigmund Freud, the great Austrian explorer of the uncharted world of the soul. Like the tragic Greek hero Oedipus, whose name is so intimately linked to the main principles of psychoanalysis, Freud courageously confronted the Sphinx. For those unaware, the riddle of the Sphinx represents the first documented riddle in history. In Greek mythology, this enigma was posed by the Sphinx to travelers at the entrance to the city of Thebes. Those who could not solve it were strangled or, according to other accounts, devoured by the monster. The riddle posed by the Sphinx was, who is the being that, having but one voice, takes the form of a quadruped, biped, and triped? Oedipus brilliantly solved the puzzle, explaining that the answer was man, who crawls on all fours as an infant, walks on two legs as an adult, and leans on a staff in old age. At least no mortal has come closer than Freud to explaining the secret of human behavior. Freud is to psychology what Galileo was to astronomy. The place where our conversation took place was Freud's summer home on the Semmering, a mountain in the Austrian Alps. The few years between my last visit and the current one had multiplied the wrinkles on his forehead. His mind was alert, his spirit intact, his courtesy impeccable as ever. But a slight speech impediment alarmed me. Now, we invite you to pay close attention to the concepts Freud will explain during this interview. Enjoy your viewing. George Sylvester Viereck.
"70 years have taught me to accept life with cheerful humility. I detest my mechanical jaw, because struggling with the mechanism consumes so much precious strength. Yet I prefer a mechanical jaw to no jaw at all. I still prefer existence to extinction. Perhaps the gods are kind to us, making life more unpleasant as we age. In the end, death seems less intolerable than the many burdens we carry."
Freud refuses to admit that fate brings him any particular malice.
Why should I expect any special favor? Age, with its evident discomforts, comes to everyone. It strikes one man here and another there. Its blow always lands on a vital spot. I do not rebel against the universal order. After all, I have lived more than 70 years. I have had enough to eat. I have enjoyed many things. The company of my wife, my children, the sunset. I have watched plants grow in spring. Every now and then, I happen to grasp a friendly hand. Once or twice, I met a human being who almost understood me. What more can I ask for?
Freud, you have achieved fame. Your work influences the literature of every country. Man looks at life and himself with different eyes because of you. And recently, on the occasion of your 70th birthday, the world came together to honor you with the exception of your own university.
If the University of Vienna had recognized me, it would have only embarrassed me. There's no reason why they should embrace me or my doctrine, just because I'm 70 years old. I don't attribute unreasonable importance to decimals. Fame only reaches us after death, and frankly, I am not interested in what comes next. I do not aspire to posthumous glory. My modesty is not a virtue.
Doesn't it mean something to you that your name will live on?
Nothing at all. Even if I were to live, which is not at all certain, I am much more concerned about the fate of my children. I hope their lives will not be as hard. I cannot make their lives much easier. The war has practically wiped out my modest fortune, the savings of a lifetime. However, fortunately, age is not too heavy a burden. I can go on. My work still gives me pleasure.
We were walking up and down a narrow path in the steep garden of the house. Freud tenderly caressed a blooming bush with his sensitive hands.
I am much more interested in this flower than in anything that might happen to me after my death.
Are you, after all, a profound pessimist?
I am not. I do not allow any philosophical reflection to spoil my enjoyment of the simple things in life.
Do you believe in the persistence of personality after death in any form?
I am not concerned about the matter. Everything that lives perishes. Why should I be an exception?
Would you like to return in some form, to be reconstituted from dust? Have you, in other words, ever desired immortality?
Frankly, no. If one recognizes the selfish motives underlying all human behavior, there is no desire to go back. Life, moving in a circle, would always be the same. Moreover, even if the eternal recurrence of things, to use Nietzsche's expression, reinvested us in our fleshly garments, what would be the point without memory? There would be no connection between past and future. For my part, I am perfectly content to know that the eternal annoyance of living will finally be overcome. Our life is necessarily a series of compromises, an endless struggle between the ego and its environment. The desire to unduly prolong life seems absurd to me.
Do you disapprove of your colleague Steinach's attempts to prolong the human lifespan?
Steinach is not trying to prolong life. He merely fights aging. By tapping into the reserve strength of our bodies, he helps tissues resist diseases. Steinach's operation sometimes halts unpleasant biological incidents, like cancer, in their early stages. It makes life more livable. It does not make it worth living. There is no reason we should want to live longer. But there are all the reasons why we should want to live with as little discomfort as possible. I am tolerably happy because I am grateful for the absence of pain and for the small pleasures of life, for my children and for my flowers.
Bernard Shaw argues that our years are too few. He believes that man can extend human life if he desires by putting his willpower at the service of the forces of evolution. According to him, humanity can regain the longevity of the patriarchs.
It is possible that death itself is not a biological necessity. Perhaps we die because we want to die. Even though hatred and love for the same person simultaneously dwell in our breast, all life combines with the desire to sustain itself, an ambivalent desire for its own annihilation. Like a stretched elastic band tends to return to its original shape, so all living matter, consciously or unconsciously, desires to return to the complete and absolute inertia of inorganic existence. The desire for death and the desire for life live side by side within us. Death is the companion of love. Together, they rule the world. This is the message of my book, Beyond the Pleasure Principle. At first, psychoanalysis took for granted that love was all important. Today we know that death is equally important. Biologically, every living being, no matter how intensely life burns within him, desires nirvana, desires the cessation of the fever called life, desires the bosom of Abraham. The desire may be masked by various circumlocutions. However, the ultimate object of life is its own extinction.
This is the philosophy of self-destruction. It justifies self-killing. It should logically lead to the global suicide predicted by Eduard von Hartmann.
Humanity does not choose suicide because the law of its being abhors the direct path to its goal. Life must complete its cycle of existence. In every normal being, the desire for life is strong enough to counterbalance the desire for death, even though in the end the desire for death proves stronger. We may think that death comes to us by our own will. It is possible that we could defeat death, if not for its ally within our breast. In this sense, we might be justified in saying that all death is a disguised suicide.
It was cold in the garden. We continued our conversation in the study. On the desk, I saw a stack of manuscripts with Freud's neat handwriting. What are you working on?
I am writing a defense of lay analysis, psychoanalysis practiced by lay people. Doctors want to make it illegal for anyone but licensed physicians to perform analysis. History, the old plagiarist, repeats itself after every discovery. At first, doctors fight every new truth. Then they try to monopolize it.
Have you received much support from lay people?
Some of my best pupils are lay people.
Do you practice a lot yourself?
Certainly. At this moment, I am working on a difficult case, unraveling the psychic conflicts of a new, interesting patient. My daughter is also a psychoanalyst.
At that moment, Miss Anna Freud appeared, followed by her patient, an 11-year-old boy with unmistakably Anglo-Saxon features. The child seemed perfectly happy, completely unaware of any conflict or tangle in his personality. Do you ever analyze yourself?
Certainly. The psychoanalyst must constantly analyze themselves. By analyzing ourselves, we are better able to analyze others. The psychoanalyst is like the scapegoat of the Jews. Others load their sins onto him. He must exercise his art to the fullest to free himself from the burden that has been thrust upon him.
It always seems to me that psychoanalysis necessarily induces, in all who practice it, the spirit of Christian charity. There is nothing in human life that psychoanalysis cannot help us understand.
On the contrary, to understand everything does not mean to forgive everything. Psychoanalysis teaches us not only what we can endure, but also what we must avoid. It tells us what must be exterminated. Tolerance of evil is not at all a corollary of knowledge. My language is German. My culture, my achievements are German. I considered myself a German intellectually until I noticed the growth of anti-Semitic prejudice in Germany and German Austria. Since then, I no longer consider myself German. I prefer to define myself as Jewish.
I'm glad, Professor, that you too have your complexes, that you too betray your mortality.
Our complexes are the source of our weaknesses. Often, they are also the source of our strengths.
I wonder what my complexes are.
A serious analysis requires at least a year. It can also take 2 or 3 years. You have dedicated many years of your life to lion hunting. You have sought, year after year, the prominent figures of your generation. Invariably, men older than you. There were Roosevelt, the Kaiser, Hindenburg, Briand, Foch, Joffre, George Brandes, Gerhard Hauptmann, and George Bernard Shaw. It is part of my job, but it is also your preference. The great man is a symbol. Your quest is the quest of your heart. You are searching for the great man to take the place of the father. It is part of your paternal complex. In your wandering Jew, you extend this search to the past. You are always the seeker of men.
I wish I could stay here long enough to see my heart through your eyes. Perhaps like Medusa, I would die of fear if I saw my own image. However, I fear I am too well versed in psychoanalysis. I would constantly anticipate or try to anticipate your intentions.
Intelligence in a patient is not a handiwork. On the contrary, it sometimes facilitates the task. Sometimes I wonder if we would be happier if we knew less about the processes that shape our thoughts and emotions. Psychoanalysis strips life of its last enchantments when it traces every feeling back to its original group of complexes. It does not make us more joyful to discover that all of us harbor the savage, the criminal, and the beast in our hearts.
What is your objection to beasts?
I infinitely prefer the company of animals to that of humans.
That is indeed a noteworthy statement, but why, Professor?
Because they are much simpler. They do not suffer from a split personality, from the disintegration of the self, which arises from man's attempt to adapt to standards of civilization too high for his intellectual and psychic mechanism. The savage, like the beast, is cruel, but lacks the malice of civilized man. Malice is man's revenge against society for the limitations it imposes. This revenge animates the professional reformer and the meddler. The savage may cut off your head, eat you, torture you, but will spare you the continuous little stings that make life in a civilized community sometimes almost unbearable. The most unpleasant habits and idiosyncrasies of man, his deceitfulness, his cowardice, his lack of reverence, are generated by his incomplete adaptation to a complicated civilization. It is the result of the conflict between our instincts and our culture. How much more pleasing are the simple, direct, and intense emotions of a dog, wagging its tail or barking its displeasure. The emotions of the dog are reminiscent of the heroes of antiquity. Perhaps this is why we unconsciously give our canines the names of ancient heroes like Achilles and Hector.
My dog is a Doberman Pinscher named Ajax. I'm glad he can't read. If he could voice his opinion on psychic traumas and Oedipal complexes, he would certainly be a less desirable member of the family. You too, Professor, find existence too complex. Yet it seems to me that you yourself are partly responsible for the complexity of modern civilization. Before you invented psychoanalysis, we didn't know that our personality is dominated by a warlike array of highly questionable complexes. Psychoanalysis has made life a complicated puzzle.
In no way does psychoanalysis simplify life. After analysis, we achieve a new synthesis. Psychoanalysis rearranges the labyrinth of wandering impulses and tries to wind them around the spool to which they belong. Or, to change the metaphor, it provides the thread that leads man out of the labyrinth of his own unconscious. Apparently, however, it seems that human life has never been so complex. And every day, some new idea, advanced by you or your disciples, makes the problem of human conduct more baffling and more contradictory. Psychoanalysis, at least, never closes the door to a new truth.
Some of your more orthodox disciples cling to every pronouncement that has ever been issued by you.
Life changes. Psychoanalysis changes too. We are just at the beginning of a new science.
It seems to me that the scientific structure you have erected is quite elaborate. Its cornerstones, the theory of substitution, infantile sexuality, dream symbols, etc., appear to be quite stable.
However, I repeat, we are just at the beginning. I am only a beginner. I have succeeded in unearthing monuments buried beneath the substrata of the mind. But where I have discovered a temple, others might discover a continent.
Do you still place much importance on sexual relations?
I respond with the words of your own poet, Walt Whitman. Yet everything fails if sex is missing. However, as I have already explained to you, today I place almost the same emphasis on what lies beyond pleasure: death, the negation of life. This desire explains why some men love pain. It's a step toward annihilation. It explains why all men seek rest, why poets give thanks, whatever the gods, that no life lives forever, that dead men never rise again, and that even the weariest river wins somewhere, safe to the sea.
Shaw, like you, does not wish to live forever, but unlike you, he finds sex uninteresting.
Shaw does not understand sex. He has not the remotest conception of love. There is no true love story in any of his works. He mocks the love story of Caesar, perhaps the greatest passion in history. Deliberately, not to say maliciously, he strips Cleopatra of all greatness and degrades her into a trivial flirt. The reason for Shaw's strange attitude towards love and his denial of the primary engine of all human events, which deprives his works of universal appeal, despite his enormous intellectual baggage, lies in his psychology. In one of his prefaces, Shaw himself points out the ascetic tendency of his temperament. I may have made many mistakes, but I am sure I have made none when I emphasized the predominance of the sexual instinct. Because the sexual instinct is so strong, it more frequently clashes with the conventions and securities of civilization. Humanity, in self-defense, tries to deny its supreme importance. Analyze any human emotion, however far from the realm of sex, and you will surely find somewhere the primal impulse to which life itself owes its perpetuation.
You have certainly succeeded in impressing this viewpoint on all modern writers. Psychoanalysis has given new intensities to literature. It has also received much from literature and philosophy. Nietzsche was one of the first psychoanalysts. It is surprising how far his intuition anticipated our discoveries. No one has more profoundly recognized the dual motivations of human behavior and the insistence of the pleasure principle on an unceasing dominion. His Zarathustra says, "Woe to those who cry, 'Go,' but pleasure craves deep, unsatisfied eternity."
Psychoanalysis is perhaps less discussed in Austria and Germany than in the United States, but its influence in literature was nonetheless immense. Thomas Mann and Hugo von Hofmannsthal owe much to it. Schnitzler is largely parallel to my development. He poetically expresses much of what I try to convey, scientifically. But Schnitzler is not just a poet, but also a scientist. The American interest in psychoanalysis does not go very deep. Broad dissemination leads to a superficial acceptance without serious research. People merely repeat phrases learned at the theater or from the press. They imagine they understand psychoanalysis because they can parrot its phrases. I prefer the more intense study of psychoanalysis in European centers. America was the first country to officially recognize me. Clark University conferred an honorary degree on me when I was still ostracized in Europe. However, America has made few original contributions to the study of psychoanalysis. Americans are skilled generalizers, but rarely creative thinkers. Furthermore, the medical trust in the United States, just like in Austria, tries to preclude the field. Leaving psychoanalysis solely in the hands of doctors would be fatal to its development. A medical training is, as often, a handicap as an advantage to the psychoanalyst. It is a handicap if certain accepted scientific conventions become too deeply ingrained in the student's mind.
Despite his uncompromising integrity, Freud is the soul of urbanity. He listens patiently to every suggestion, never attempting to overpower his interviewer. It was time to catch the train back to the city that once housed the imperial splendor of the Habsburgs. Freud, accompanied by his wife and daughter, climbed the steps leading from his mountain retreat to the road to bid me farewell. He appeared gray and sad as he waved goodbye.
Do not make me appear pessimistic. I do not despise the world. Expressing contempt for the world is just another method to court it, to gain an audience and applause. No, I am not a pessimist. Not as long as I have my children, my wife, and my flowers. The flowers, fortunately, have neither character nor complexity. I love my flowers.
Like Oedipus, Freud looked too deeply into the eyes of the Sphinx. The monster poses its riddle to every traveler. Those who do not know the answer are cruelly grabbed and dashed against the rocks. However, it may be kinder to those it destroys than to those who guess its secret. What do you think about Sigmund Freud? Do you believe that psychoanalysis is essential to our lives? Or has it added even more obstacles to our existence? Let us know in the comments section. And in the meantime, thank you for following us. See you in the next video.